I'll start this way. If I could teach one great play as the quintessential American tragedy, it would be the 1949 Pulitzer Prize winner, The Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. In this play, the titular salesman, Willie Loman, is a 63-year-old failing salesman who has been fired from his company because, well, he's just not selling anymore very well. He can't afford to retire. He can't make the payments on the car and the new appliances in his little old New York apartment. The only asset he has left is a little bit of life insurance. And he ends up musing that after all those appointments and all the years, and you wind up worth more dead than alive. His whole life has been built around being a successful provider for his family. He has lived his life by one particular mythical narrative of the American dream, being a big, important man with money and prestige. And we realize, in fact, he himself realizes by the end of the play, that whether he's successful or not, he is loved by his family, even though he hasn't been what he's always wanted. In fact, he is neither well liked. By the end of the play, he finally comes to the conclusion that his life insurance is the only thing he has left to give, so he commits suicide. He imagines a huge funeral with hundreds of people in attendance, and only 5 people show up. And that's The Death of a Salesman. The Death of a Salesman is one of the greatest American plays ever written. And the Dustin Hoffman performance, which is available on Amazon, oh, it will just break your heart. So beautiful. But you know what? That line, or at least the idea of that line, you're worth more dead than alive. Well, The Death of a Salesman is not the first American drama to use that line in a famous and important way. It had popped up 3 years before the 1949 play in the 1946 fantasy drama, It's a Wonderful Life. We saw some clips from that a little bit earlier. You remember that movie, I'm sure. Now, before I launch into this comparison, I need to reassure some of you English teachers here that I'm perfectly aware that as literature goes, The Death of a Salesman is far greater drama, teaches a far deeper truth than It's a Wonderful Life. With all of its guardian angels and magical trips into an alternative universe and so on. Setting all that aside, however, really does make for an interesting contrast. In It's a Wonderful Life, the inimitable Jimmy Stewart plays another Willie, Will Bailey, a young man who, against his own will, inherits his father's Old Bailey building and loan. Throughout the film, the Bailey building and loan is in competition with mean old Mr. Potter's bank. Mr. Potter is sort of a modern day Mr. Scrooge. He owns everything in town worth owning except the Old Bailey building and loan. And despite Mr. Potter's constant efforts to buy or quash the building and loan, despite all of his efforts to buy off Will Bailey with a better job that would provide the money and the prestige that both Willies want, the Bailey Building and Loan putters on, providing, little business loans and savings accounts and mortgages that make affordable homeownership possible for the residents of the little town of Bedford Falls. Will Bailey had always wanted the same thing that Willie Loman had always wanted: money and prestige. Young Will had dreamed of traveling the world and building big buildings and being a big, famous, important man. Instead, he's forced to stay in what he calls this crummy little town. But the magic of the guardian angel shows him what the crummy little town would be like if he had never been born. Will Bailey learns that his devotion to the people of Bedford Falls has made life livable and good there. Bedford Falls has not turned into some dreaded Potterville. Will learns that his devotion, his good heart and loving nature has made all this possible. At the end of the movie, Mr. Potter has stolen a deposit from the Bailey Building and Loan and reported poor old Will for malfeasance and embezzlement. So he's looking at jail. And so when Will goes to Mr. Potter for help, not knowing Potter is actually the guy that stole the money, Will mentions his life insurance policy as one of his few assets. And Potter chuckles, "Good grief, Will Bailey, you're worth more dead than alive." It's after that conversation that Will Bailey is ready to commit suicide, just like Willie Loman. But the people of the town that his love and dedication have saved all come together at the last moment and collect the $8,000 to save him. At the conclusion, Will Bailey's brother raises a Christmas toast to Will Bailey. You remember how it goes? The richest man in town. All of which made Arthur Miller want to throw up, I'm sure. It's a Wonderful Life is disturbingly schmaltzy and sentimental for some of us. And The Death of a Salesman is way too dark for others. But let's keep both Will and Willie in mind as we think about the problem of meaning. What do we mean when we talk about the meaning of life? How do we live a life of meaning? Well, believe it or not, I believe we could start by thinking about toasters. Yeah, toasters. Now, hang with me because I'm going somewhere with this, I think. Why do you have a toaster? Well, to toast breads, of course. Bagels and sourdough bread in our house. It has meaning for me, but only for as long as it toasts my bread. If it stops toasting and can't be repaired, or it costs more to repair it than to buy a new one, what am I going to do with Willie the toaster? Away it goes into the trash can. Now, the person who actually operates my toaster, most of the time, is my wife, Susan, over there. I have the good fortune to be married to a domestic goddess who loves working in the kitchen, just really loves it. Well, what if one day she couldn't work in the kitchen anymore? What if she couldn't do our laundry or straighten our house any longer because of an injury or the depredations of old age? Would I throw her in the trash? Would she be garbage to me? Well, of course not. it doesn't really matter to me what she can do. It matters to me who she is, that I love her and that I care for her. She loves me and cares for me. And there you go, I see you taking notes. Her meaning to me goes far beyond what she can do. My meaning to her the same. We have infinite meaning for each other. Willie Loman mistook himself for a toaster. Mistook himself for what he could do. And the most tragic thing about it is that at the very end of the play, he realizes how much his son Biff has loved him, despite how badly Willie has disrespected Biff since he failed to get into college. Biff loves Willie, his dad, for who he is, not what he can do. But Willie has invested his whole sense of meaning into what he can do for his family. And that is how he came to the conclusion that he was worth more dead than alive. Because he couldn't do anything more for them. And it was never enough just to love them. He had their love. It was there all the time. He was too that his life with what he could do and who he was. He believed his life had no more meaning than that of a no longer working, disposable, and easily replaceable toaster. In Wonderful Life, the other Will Bailey's circle of love, is connected by the end of the movie because the love that he's given is returned and fully acknowledged. He never becomes wealthy or famous or important to anyone outside of that crummy little town. But he is toasted the richest man in town because he has been able throughout his life to give love and has received it from the people of Bedford Falls. He hasn't done big things in Bedford Falls or anywhere else. But the townspeople realize Will Bailey has genuinely loved them and that his love has made a difference in their lives. Now, this suggests to me that the meaning of life has more to do with something you are than something you do. I suspect we have meaning when we love people, and we have meaning when we love people. Whether they love us back or not is the really interesting part. I see this suggested when people feel the impulse to run into a burning building because someone in my family is in there. Someone that is the meaning of my life is in there, and I've got to get them out. I see this suggested when people are caught up in a school shooting, and the one thing those kids want to do in case they die is call someone and say, I love you. Whether they say it back or not. So meaning may have something to do with loving and being loved. But even if that's true, before I go any further with this, I need to make one thing perfectly clear. If love is somewhere at the heart of this, I can assure you it has nothing to do with ooey, gooey, sappy sentimentalism. I remember once at the church that I came to pastor when I first came to Daytona Beach. After I'd finished a sermon about love and the Christian life, one of the little old ladies shaking my hand as they were leaving the building says to me, thank you, Dr. Shoopman. I love sermons on love. What, baby? I just wanted to jump out of my skin. She so did not get it. Yes, love can be sweet and sentimental, and I like sentimental love. But love is frequently hard and requires us to do things that are not always pleasant or easy or even nice. If you've ever raised a child, you know this. I remember my mother trying to put a medically prescribed salve in my eyes when I was 7 or 8 years old, and me screaming and fighting like somebody was trying to blind me. Love is when you care for somebody else's good as much as you care for your own. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. When it makes you feel ooey gooey good, and most certainly when it doesn't. That will give your life a sense of meaning that you seek. Some people need sentimental expressions of love in their relationships. Others get along just fine without it. But everyone you've ever met wants to love someone, and certainly wants to be loved in return. At first glance, we tend to think that being loved would be the more important part of an equation. But oddly enough, that doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, everybody wants to know that they matter more than the toaster in the trash can. But as far as I have been able to see, being loved does not seem to be able to do the work of meaning all by itself. At the end of The Death of a Salesman, Willie Loman had come to the shocking realization that Biff had loved him all along. Isn't that remarkable? He muses to himself. He's loved me all this time. He knew his wife loved him, and yet that was not enough to count for meaning in his life. He was still so wrapped up in being a big, important man with money that he could not love them back and let that be enough. Now, Will Bailey in Wonderful Life has a different experience. When Clarence, the guardian angel, shows him what his crummy little town would be like if he had never been born, he loves the town and its people so much that he's willing to face prison on a false charge in order to go back and go on loving them. It is mostly the giving of love that seems to bring with it the gift of meaning. And maybe that is the secret to what Jesus means in the short little epigram, that it is more blessed to give than to receive. Conversely, I have seen what people can become like who are unable to give love. And it appears that they cannot get enough of it. They are overwhelmed with the need for something that Minister Greg Bauer calls false love. False love, or substitutes for love, can come in a wide variety of forms. All the money you can make, all the sex you can get, all the agreement you can garner, all the votes you can sway, all the obedience you can command. They have all that anyone could ever want and still want more. Because their lives are empty and devoid of meaning, because they're incapable of really loving somebody else in a meaningful way. They want to matter so badly, and the more they get or the more they achieve, the less their lives seem to matter, and they thrive on adulation until they demand it of everyone. I'm sure none of us can think of anyone like that. So let's move on. People find meaning in finding someone to care about. Of course, there's risk in that. When those people leave or reject them or die, we suffer a loss of meaning itself. Human life is tragic and fragile. So maybe that is one reason why many people find meaning in the idea of a religion or a personal God. Some people are under the impression that religion is primarily about becoming a better person. But I think you and I would agree, becoming religious doesn't always guarantee that people will become better people. Sometimes when you become religious, you become a more dangerous person. Sometimes. Some people are made better, but other people are not. Good or dangerous, they find meaning, and in theistic religions, they find eternal meaning. Ethics is just a byproduct of theistic religion. The God business is primarily the meaning business. You matter eternally to an eternal God and can give love to that God forever. That's what you believe. So theists often denigrate atheists and agnostics for living what they very arrogantly call a meaningless life. But this is incredibly condescending. As long as any person can care for others and give love, that person has an enduring source of meaning and hope that can always be regenerated. Let's take a worst case scenario for a minute. Let's say that at the end of your life, your kids put you in a nursing home and they forget about you and there is no God there to comfort you. You've literally been put away on a shelf until you die. You can react to this terrible loss of familial meaning with grief and horrible loneliness. Many people do. But you can also say, man, this is the saddest place I've ever seen. And there are these people, all these people here need love as much as I do. I'm going to give it to them. I'm going to be the one to give love here and make a difference. Unless, of course, you're Jean-Paul Sartre and you believe that hell is other people. In which case you might see the world and life in it as totally absurd and without meaning. But the atheists that I have known have been some of the most caring, ethically rigorous, and gracious people that I know, and live lives of deep and profound significance. So there's that. So I think meaning is more about being than doing, although the two movies I've referenced might give you the impression that because Will Bailey has done more for others than Willy Loman, that's why Will Bailey is able to discover meaning and therefore hope. But I've seen people with very meaningful lives who were not able to do much for others because they just didn't have much to work with. We express the love we have with what we have, however much or however little that is. Some of you guys might remember Jesus once observed the widow give her mite to the temple treasury and announced that she had given more than anybody there because she gave out of all that she had, while other people gave a little out of their abundance. I know, like what Jesus, it's a Baptist thing, just roll with it. The doing that we manage, our careers, our volunteer work, and our care of family and friends and neighbors, all of that is an expression of our meaning by setting ourselves to a sense of purpose. Purpose is an important subset or outgrowth of meaning. Meaning is about loving and caring. Purpose is about finding a way to express our love and our care in a meaningful way, meaningful ways that often go beyond the scope of our immediate family and friends. Do you guys remember, some of you, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but do you remember the old 1968 song, the Glenn Campbell song, Wichita Lineman? You know Wichita Lineman? Oh, you should listen to it sometime. I am a lineman for the county. And I drive the rainbow, searching in the sun for another all alone. And I need you more than you, and I want you for all time. And the Wichita line is still on the line. It's been called the world's first existential country song. That's a song about both kinds of love, something personal and something purposeful. He is taking a moment to tell his lover that he cares for her infinitely. Some anonymous man up on a telephone pole, we've seen him a million times, with the same huge feelings that we all have. But he's also taking care of a job that cares for others. While he's thinking of her, he's also thinking, snows that stretch down south will never stand the strain. That line could be read as an expansion of love, extending to people he's never met, never will meet, who need what he can do for them. We need those guys. We need plumbers and grocery store clerks and road papers and watchmakers. They make our lives better by doing what they do. And I realize that many of those people do what they do just for the paycheck, and that's all. But you can do anything, perform any service, at least in part, as an act of caring, as an extension of your meaning beyond your family and your friends. It can be an expression of your love and an extension of your meaning toward the world. We need to encourage all lives to have rich and powerful meaning, among those that we know and love especially. Right now, I'm thinking about my mother, who is about 82 years old, living with her stepchildren from her last marriage up in Hot Springs, Arkansas. My mom was widowed about 3 years ago and left largely destitute. My sister, who is well off enough to take care of her, wants her to move back to Florida, where we can kind of keep an eye on her and watch out for her and help her with things, which is, I think, a noble and generous impulse. And I know I would love to have Mom back here, be able to see her regularly and care for her. She's got a thing about how she needs to stay in Arkansas and take care of those 3 20-something stepchildren. Now, mind you, she can't do much for them. She has no money, very little room. She can't really do much for them, but she feels like she can give them her love, her support, her cheerleading. Her kids here in Florida, we're well established, we're fine, but those kids need encouragement, and I can be here to give it to them. If she comes back to Florida, I'm reasonably sure she'll live longer in years. But if she stays with her second set of children, her life may have a greater sense of purpose. She can better express her meaning. She can give something, however small it may be. My wife, who's very sentimental, even when she's taking notes, has one of those proverbial sayings up on a wall next to the kitchen entrance that says, "Life is not measured by the breaths you take, but by the moments that take your breath away." Put more life in your years, not more years in your life. Meaning is a quality of life issue. And we need to support it wherever we can find it and nurture it wherever we don't find it, so that everyone we know has the chance to live a meaningful life. Now, I know very well that the death of a salesman is a better drama, telling a deeper, more powerful truth than It's a Wonderful Life. But keep in mind, whose life would you rather live? The life of Willie Loman, who despairs of himself because he cannot give love, or the life of Will Bailey, the richest man in town with no money? Thank you so much